This video is for educational and documentary purposes only. GangsterFileUSA does not promote or glorify violence, criminal organizations, or illegal activity. All people and events discussed are part of real historical crime cases in the United States based on public records and journalistic sources and are shown to highlight the real consequences of crime. Violence is mentioned strictly for reporting in historical context in line with YouTube policies. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is Gangster Files USA, where we don't glorify the streets, we document them. Here, we break down the real histories behind America's most dangerous gangs, criminal networks, and underground empires. We explore how they started, how they grew, and how their decisions reshaped cities, families, and lives, often in ways the mainstream never fully explains. Every story you hear here is part of a bigger picture, a picture of power, survival, and the cost of crime. If you want to understand the streets, not the myths, but the reality, you're in the right place.
Welcome to GangsterFileUSA. To understand the Crips, we have to go back to Los Angeles in the late 1960s. This was a city under pressure. Racial segregation, economic decline after World War II, and entire black neighborhoods cut off from opportunity. Young African-American men were excluded from mainstream youth organizations, jobs were disappearing, and the streets became the only place where identity and protection could be found. In 1969, two teenagers, Raymond Washington and Stanley Tookie Williams, brought together groups from the east and west sides of South Central Los Angeles. Their goal was simple and brutal: unite local street groups to defend territory and push back against rival gangs. At the beginning, the Crips were not a single organization. They were an alliance, a loose network of independent groups, later called sets. Each set controlled its own area, answered to no central authority, and followed its own rules. Loyalty was local, not national. Most early members were barely out of high school. Some were only 16 or 17 years old. What began as neighborhood protection quickly turned into something far more dangerous. Violence escalated, reputation became everything, and as the alliance grew, control became harder to maintain. Stanley Williams later rejected claims that the Crips were created as a political or community movement. In his own words, it was a fighting alliance against other street gangs, nothing more. As the 1970s progressed, the number of Crip sets exploded. By the end of the decade, dozens of sets existed across Los Angeles, but unity was fragile. Disputes between sets turned violent, and after the death of Raymond Washington in 1979, internal wars ripped the alliance apart. From that moment forward, the Crips were no longer just fighting outsiders, they were fighting themselves. And that internal chaos would shape everything that followed. Gang violence in South Central Los Angeles did not appear overnight. Its roots stretched back to the 1950s, shaped by forces far bigger than the streets themselves. After World War II, factories closed, jobs disappeared, and entire neighborhoods were pushed into poverty. Young African-American men grew up surrounded by unemployment, broken homes, and a system that offered them few paths forward. Opportunities were scarce, and exclusion was common. Mainstream youth organizations, including groups like the Boy Scouts, were largely inaccessible to them. As a result, many young men began forming their own street-based social clubs, groups that initially offered protection, identity, and belonging. As the years passed, political movements that once gave direction and purpose to young black communities began to fade. Organizations like the Black Panther Party and the Black Power movement lost influence due to internal struggles, government crackdowns, and leadership losses. With those structures weakened, many youths were left without guidance or representation. In this vacuum, the streets became the new battleground, and gangs slowly filled the space once occupied by activism and community organization. By the late 1960s, South Central Los Angeles was already divided by territory, loyalty, and violence. Small neighborhood gangs clashed regularly, each trying to protect its own streets. It was during this tense period that two young men crossed paths, Stanley "Tookie" Williams and Raymond Lee Washington. Both were deeply involved in gang life, but each came from different sides of South Central. Washington led a powerful group on the east side, while Williams commanded respect on the west side. In 1969, the two made a decision that would change the future of street gangs in Los Angeles. Instead of continuing endless neighborhood wars, they chose to unite their groups into a single fighting alliance. Their goal was simple and brutal: overpower rival gangs and dominate the streets. Most of the young men who joined them were teenagers, barely out of childhood, drawn in by promises of strength, brotherhood, and protection. Despite later myths, this alliance was not formed for political reasons or community reform. It had no revolutionary agenda and no connection to activist groups. Williams himself later made it clear that the purpose was purely street-based. It was about power, survival, and violence, nothing more. The alliance was designed to fight other gangs, and from the beginning, conflict was built into its foundation. Washington, a student at Fremont High School, controlled the East Side faction, while Williams, attending Washington High School, led the West Side. Together, they formed what would become known as the Crips. At first, the structure was loose. Each neighborhood operated independently, connected only by name and shared enemies. This lack of centralized control would later become one of the gang's most destructive weaknesses. Symbols quickly became important. Clothing, colors, and hand signs were used to identify allies and intimidate rivals. One of the most powerful symbols emerged almost by accident. Curtis "Buddha" Morrow, one of the early members, favored blue clothing, blue jeans, blue shirts, and dark blue suspenders. When Morrow was shot and killed in February 1973, fellow members wore blue bandanas in his memory. Over time, the color blue became permanently linked to the Crips. It was no longer just fashion, it was a warning. As the 1970s progressed, the Crips expanded rapidly. What started as a single alliance turned into dozens of independent gangs known as sets. By 1978, there were at least 45 Crip sets operating across Los Angeles. Each controlled its own territory, enforced its own rules, and answered to no central authority. Loyalty to the name existed, but unity did not. Criminal activity escalated alongside this growth. Crip sets became deeply involved in the drug trade, particularly the production and distribution of PCP, marijuana, and amphetamines. Drugs brought money, and money brought weapons. Violence increased as rival gangs and sometimes other Crip sets fought over territory and profits. The streets of South Central became war zones, where gunfire was common and death came quickly. Leadership, which had once held the alliance together, began to collapse. In March 1979, Stanley "Tookie" Williams was arrested and charged with 4 murders. His removal left the West Side without its most influential figure. Just months later, in August 1979, Raymond Washington was gunned down and killed. This death sent shockwaves through the Crip world. Washington had strongly opposed infighting among Crips. He believed internal wars would destroy everything they had built. After his death, that restraint vanished. Without their founders, the alliance began to fracture. Long-standing tensions between sets exploded into open warfare. Crips turned on Crips, and loyalty to the larger name was replaced by neighborhood pride and personal revenge. One of the deadliest internal conflicts erupted between the Rollin 60s neighborhood Crips and the 8 Trey gangster Crips. What began as a local dispute quickly spread, forcing other Crip sets to choose sides. Entire neighborhoods aligned themselves with the neighborhood Crips or the gangster Crips. Drive-by shootings, ambushes, and retaliatory killings became daily occurrences. South Central descended into chaos. Some factions completely broke away. The East Coast Crips severed their ties, as did the Hoover Crips. Old alliances collapsed, replaced by distrust and bloodshed.
The Crips, once united against external enemies, were now fighting wars on multiple fronts, against rival gangs like the Bloods and against themselves. By 1980, the organization was in turmoil. There was no single leader, no unified command, and no shared vision. Violence spiraled out of control, fueled by drugs, pride, and revenge. The streets paid the price. Innocent residents were caught in the crossfire, and entire communities lived under constant fear. What had begun as an attempt to control chaos ultimately created something far worse. The Crips became a symbol of unchecked street power, an alliance born from poverty and exclusion, transformed into a network of violence that would shape gang culture across the United States for decades to come. Their story is not of ideology or revolution. It is a story of young men shaped by harsh environments, pulled into a world where survival demanded loyalty, violence, and silence. And once that world took hold, there was no easy way out.
After the Nicaraguan Revolution of 1979, a chain of events began that would quietly reshape the streets of American cities, especially south-central Los Angeles. When the Sandinistas overthrew the government of Anastasio Somoza Debayle, many former officials, military figures, and allies of the old regime fled Nicaragua. A number of them found refuge in the United States. Behind the scenes, the Cold War was still burning, and U.S. intelligence agencies were focused on one mission: stopping the spread of communism in Central America. The CIA supported armed counter-revolutionary forces known as the Contras. These groups needed money, weapons, and logistics to fight the new Nicaraguan government. According to later allegations, Enrique Bermudez was selected to lead the Contras, and meetings took place with figures like Oscar Danilo Blandón and Norwin Meneses to discuss funding strategies. Traditional funding sources were limited, and a darker solution emerged: drug trafficking. Cocaine became the chosen currency of war. To generate massive profits quickly, traffickers focused on U.S. cities, and black communities in South Los Angeles became a primary target. Crack cocaine, cheap to produce and devastatingly addictive, flooded the streets. What began as a foreign political conflict soon turned into a domestic nightmare. By the early 1980s, the crack epidemic exploded across urban America. For street gangs like the Crips, this drug wave changed everything. Crack brought money on a scale they had never seen before. Crip sets moved quickly, establishing distribution networks, protecting territory with violence, and eliminating competition. The streets turned into open-air drug markets, and profits poured in daily. With money came power. With power came expansion. Crip sets began pushing beyond Los Angeles, moving into neighboring states and eventually across the country. Gang members traveled to establish new drug routes, recruit locals, and claim fresh territory. By the late 1980s, the Crips were no longer just a California phenomenon. They were a national criminal force. By the end of the decade, law enforcement estimated tens of thousands of Crips operating through hundreds of sets. Drug trafficking had transformed the gang from a loose street alliance into one of the largest criminal networks in the United States. Cocaine, especially crack, became the engine that fueled their growth. By 1999, authorities believed there were at least 600 Crip sets, with more than 30,000 members involved in drug transportation and distribution across the country. The organization had become too large, too decentralized, and too deeply embedded in street economies to dismantle easily. Membership in the Crips continued to grow into the 1990s and beyond. By 2015, estimates placed the gang's strength at roughly 30,000 to 35,000 members, spread across about 800 sets. These sets were active in over 220 cities and more than 40 U.S. states. While California remained the stronghold, major activity was also concentrated in Texas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. Although the Crips were originally formed by young African-American men, membership expanded over time. White, Hispanic, Asian, and Pacific Islander members joined various sets, especially outside California.
The gang's influence even crossed national borders, establishing a presence in Canada during the early 1990s, with active sets operating in cities like Montreal and Toronto. Despite their criminal reputation, Crip members could be found in unexpected places. Some served in the U.S. Armed Forces and were stationed on military bases, both domestically and abroad. This blurred the line between street life and mainstream society, making the gang's reach even more complex and harder to track. Life inside the Crips followed strict cultural codes. Language itself became a weapon. Members altered spelling and speech to show loyalty and disrespect rivals. The letter B associated with the Bloods was often crossed out or avoided entirely. Letter combinations like CK, interpreted as Crip Killer, were replaced with CC. Ordinary words transformed. Kickback became kickback, and block became block. Every detail mattered. Crips commonly referred to each other as cuz or cuzzes, a term that signified brotherhood. On the other hand, calling a Crip a crab was considered one of the highest insults, often provoking violent retaliation. In prisons during the 1970s and 1980s, some Crips even used Swahili to communicate secretly, keeping guards and rival gangs in the dark. Crime was central to daily operations. Like most major street gangs, the Crips generated income through a wide range of illegal activities. Drug dealing was the backbone, but it wasn't the only source. Illegal gambling, robbery, theft, pimping, and extortion all played a role. Local dealers who operated independently were often forced to pay for protection or face violence. Vandalism and property crimes were also common. Graffiti served as both territorial marking and psychological warfare. Stolen vehicles were used for transportation, crimes were simply for thrill-seeking rides through rival neighborhoods. These acts reinforced gang pride and sent clear messages about control. Over time, the black market sale of illegal firearms became another major income stream. Weapons flowed through underground channels, strengthening the gang's firepower and making conflicts deadlier. The combination of drugs, guns, and money turned many Crip sets into highly dangerous criminal enterprises. The crack epidemic of the 1980s marked the most powerful phase of the Crips' rise. Profits from crack sales expanded their influence, increased recruitment, and intensified violence. Entire neighborhoods were destabilized, addiction spread, families collapsed, and while the gang grew stronger, the communities around them paid the heaviest price. What began as a street alliance eventually became a nationwide network fueled by international politics, narcotics trafficking, and unchecked violence. The story of the Crips during this era isn't just a gang story. It's a reflection of how global conflicts, government decisions, and street realities collided, leaving scars that still remain today.
In the early years, the Crips were not just another street gang. They were a movement spreading faster than anyone expected. Across south-central Los Angeles, youth gangs began aligning themselves under the Crip identity. One by one, small neighborhood crews adopted the name, the color blue, and the reputation that came with it. The growth was explosive. At one point, Crip-affiliated gangs outnumbered non-Crip gangs by nearly 3-to-1. That imbalance created tension almost immediately. Non-Crip gangs felt surrounded, threatened, and slowly pushed out of their own neighborhoods. Groups like the LA Brims, the Athens Park Boys, the Bishops, the Drill Company, and the Denver Lanes found themselves facing an expanding force that seemed unstoppable. Disputes over territory, respect, and retaliation began to erupt across the city. By 1971, the Crips were no longer confined to a few neighborhoods. Their name carried weight across Los Angeles. Their reputation traveled faster than their footsteps. Around that same time, a gang based on Piru Street in Compton, the Piru Street Boys, formed and chose to align themselves with the Crips. Initially, the alliance made sense. The Pirus became recognized as a Crip set, sharing protection, identity, and enemies. For a brief period, there was peace. 2 years passed with relative calm, but beneath the surface, resentment grew. The alliance was fragile. Differences in leadership, internal discipline and violent behavior began to strain relationships between the Pirus and other Crip sets. What started as disagreements turned into confrontations. Soon, former allies were facing each other across streets that once felt shared. The conflict escalated rapidly, transforming into open warfare. By 1973, the violence had reached a breaking point. The Pirus had grown tired of the bloodshed. They believed the Crips had gone too far, too reckless, too aggressive, too unwilling to control their own. Seeking an end to the violence, the Pirus called for a meeting with other gangs that had also become targets of Crip expansion. These gangs shared stories of intimidation, attacks, and forced submission. The meeting changed everything. After long discussions, a decision was made that would reshape gang history in Los Angeles. The Pirus officially severed all ties with the Crips. They did not simply walk away, they formed a new identity, a new alliance, and a new opposition force. That organization would soon become known as the Bloods. What followed was not just a rivalry, it was a war. From that point forward, the streets of Los Angeles were divided by color, allegiance, and blood. Blue versus red, Crips versus Bloods. The rivalry became deeply personal, fueled by revenge killings, territory disputes, and generational hatred. Violence was no longer isolated, it became systematic. And the Crips were not united even among themselves. As the gang continued to grow, internal divisions became impossible to control. Different Crip sets began fighting each other just as fiercely as they fought the Bloods. Power struggles, drug profits, and neighborhood pride turned brother against brother. One of the most notorious internal rivalries was between the Rollin 60s neighborhood Crips and the 83 Gangster Crips. Beginning in the late 1970s, their feud became one of the bloodiest in Los Angeles. Both sides claimed dominance, and neither was willing to back down. Shootings became routine, retaliation was expected. Innocent residents were often caught in the middle. In Watts, the violence reached another level. The Grape Street Crips and the P.J. Watts Crips clashed repeatedly, turning entire blocks into war zones. The feud became so intense that the P.J. Watts Crips made a shocking move. They temporarily aligned themselves with a local blood set, the Bounty Hunter Bloods, just to fight their Crip rivals. Alliances no longer followed traditional rules. Survival came first. By the mid-1990s, some Crip sets were so deeply entangled in conflicts that even the Crip identity became a liability. The Hoover Crips, locked in constant warfare with other Crip factions, made a strategic decision. They dropped the Crip name entirely and rebranded themselves as the Hoover Criminals. It was a clear signal. Unity within the Crips was breaking apart. But despite internal fractures, one rivalry remained constant: the Bloods. The Bloods were the Crips' most enduring and dangerous enemy. Originally, they formed as a defensive response to Crip aggression, particularly to protect Piru Street gang members from ongoing attacks. The roots of this rivalry stretched back to high school conflicts, personal assaults, and neighborhood grudges that escalated beyond control. As the Crips' attacks increased, more gangs that felt victimized began joining the Bloods. What started as scattered resistance turned into an organized federation of non-Crip gangs. Over time, that federation solidified into a powerful and unified force. Between the early 1970s and the end of the decade, the Crips-Bloods rivalry accounted for a large share of gang-related murders in southern Los Angeles. Entire communities lived under constant fear. Gunfire became background noise. Retaliation cycles never stopped. The war did not stay in Los Angeles. As Crip and Blood sets spread across the United States, they carried the rivalry with them. Cities far from California began experiencing the same patterns: territorial disputes, color-based violence, and generational feuds. Decades later, this rivalry would still be linked to major acts of violence, including mass shootings connected to gang disputes. Even in the modern era, echoes of this war continue to surface. Violent incidents tied to Crip-Blood tensions have appeared in cities far removed from their origins, proving that the rivalry never truly ended, it only migrated.
While street wars raged outside, a different kind of alliance formed behind bars. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, mass incarceration sent thousands of Crip members to state and federal prisons across the country. Inside prison walls, survival required new strategies. Old rivalries mattered less than protection. This led to an alliance between the Crips and a prison-based organization known as the Folk Nation, particularly in Midwest and Southern U.S. prisons. The goal was simple: mutual protection against rival prison gangs. The alliance became known as the 8 Ball. Inside prison, the alliance was powerful. Outside, it was fragile. The relationship worked best behind bars, where strict lines were enforced. On the streets, it often collapsed under old grudges and new conflicts. A broken 8 Ball symbolized disagreement or active hostility between the groups, a signal that peace had ended. What the Crips story reveals is not just the rise of a gang, but the collapse of unity under unchecked expansion. Growth brought power, but also chaos. Alliances turned into wars. Brothers became enemies. Neighborhoods became battlegrounds. The Crips did not simply fight the system, they became trapped inside their own creation. And as decades passed, the legacy of those early decisions continued to shape the streets, the prisons, and the lives caught in between.
Thanks for watching till the end. We hope this video gave you a deeper understanding of the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. This is GangsterFileUSA. We'll see you in the next one.